Okay, we are officially recording. So this is the Zoom session related specifically to CP3. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. This PowerPoint that I'm going to be referring to and using is actually already now posted on the clinical Plato site under the CP3 module. So you can refer back to it as well as the Zoom video. Okay, so this is all going to focus on CP3, just going through the assignment. And again, chat box, as you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I want to make sure I address that and just hit any points, questions you have. So the purpose of this assignment, as with CP2, it's basically designed to evaluate your achievement of various course outcomes. So you know about our 7 threads: professional behaviors, consumer-centered care, teaching and learning, nursing process, informatics, communication, evidence-based practice. So this assignment obviously focuses highly on the teaching and learning piece, but it also incorporates consumer-centered care because you have to tailor your planning and your teaching towards a specific patient. It also ties into nursing process because you have to assess the patient and they're from a knowledge deficit perspective and their learning style. You have to, plan your goal for them. You have to plan your interventions, which are essentially for this, the points you're teaching them, and you're going to have to be evaluating your patient. It hits communication because you're going to be verbally communicating with your patient. And certainly it hits evidence-based practice because you have to make sure you're actually teaching them the correct information. So it really hits a lot of the clinical behaviors and course outcomes that are associated with 188. So your performance in this really is additional evidence of how you have met clinical behaviors and course outcomes, which is especially important with COVID-19 because, we lost 4 weeks at clinical. We lost 4 weeks at clinical. So this is a really, really important assignment. So CP3, Lord, in particular, focuses on you preparing and providing appropriate client teaching for a client that's newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So the written component is really to help you with planning and evaluating the client teaching. It's kind of help get you prepped. And then the actual video component is where you're going to be providing the teaching to the patient. So obviously this assignment was designed when we were supposed to be on campus. That's not the case. But you still will need somebody to play the patient. So the role of the patient needs to be played by another individual. If you're working as a pair or a group, it has to be somebody outside of your group. Initially in the instructions, I said it needed to be another student. Obviously that's changed with COVID-19. I'm okay if you use anybody. It can be a family member that lives with one of you. It can be a friend that lives with one of you. The one thing you do need to keep in mind, and we'll talk about the different topics and props and that, once we go through this, you might find with your group that, this topic we picked maybe not be the most feasible for the situation. If you need to switch your topic, I'm okay with that, but we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later as I'm going through this PowerPoint. With the teaching, you need to understand that if it's something for its psychomotor skills, so for example, blood glucose monitoring, to evaluate your patient, they're going to be expected to demonstrate that skill. So if you're doing blood glucose monitoring, the patient that you pick has to be willing to do that. So you can't coerce them into doing that. They need to be willing and able to participate. So just kind of think that through. So I'm going to start with the written piece first, and we'll go through that, and then we'll talk about the video. Because as you're doing this with your group, you really want to you want to start with the written piece, because what you do on the written part helps guide your video. The very last part of the written plan, the evaluation piece, you cannot do that until after you do your video because you have to evaluate the patient's performance in the video, okay? But we'll start with the written plan. So it's very important that you refer to the client info document that's posted on the Clinical Plato. Your patient is Barb. There is a lot of psychosocial information about Barb and just general information about Barb. So you need to make sure you look at that, because one of our roles as the RN with teaching is to be able to individualize it to the specific patient. So the information that's on there needs to be incorporated. And I'm both into your written planning and the actual video teaching. And let me kind of talk a little bit about that. So on the written part, it talks about client-specific physiological and psychosocial factors that you consider during the planning phase of the client education. And you need to specifically describe how you incorporated these items into the actual teaching you provided or you're going to be providing. So for example, this does not apply to Barb, but I'm going to use it as an example. If your patient was hard of hearing, okay, if they were hard of hearing, you could mark that. And for this, where it says list the factors, you can just bullet them. You don't need to make it fancy. You can bullet them. But you would list, hard of hearing, because that's a factor. And then you would describe how you would incorporate or you would address that into the teaching provided. So for example, you could write, ensure the patient has her hearing aid or any assisted devices in, and make sure you are facing the patient while you're communicating with them. Okay, boom, that's one bullet point. You can come down the information that's in the client info document. There's stuff related to her culture. There's stuff related to religion. There's stuff related to educational, occupational, hobbies, resources, family dynamics. That's the stuff that we're looking at here. Okay, so for the written piece, all you have to do is identify and talk about 5 of them. When you do the video, you need to show incorporation of at least 4 of them. So without completely giving it away, but let's say she has particular hobbies that might impact your chosen teaching topic, okay? Incorporating those lifestyle factors in. Because that's when we talk about teaching and we talk about teaching somebody who has a newly diagnosed chronic condition, you can develop the best plan in the world. But if it's not compatible with their lifestyle, if it doesn't work with their goals and their resources, it's a waste of time, okay? For them to truly be compliant and increase our likelihood that they are going to learn and adhere to the plan and be able to control their diabetes, you have to make it work for Barb, okay? You have to make it work for Barb. So that's where this really hits in. So it hits into assessment, but it really hits the consumer-centered care and how you are going to plan and tailor this education specifically to her. Okay, so 5 items on the written part, 4 items need to be evident within your video. And you don't necessarily, like for example, the hard of hearing one, like you don't need to say in the video, Barb is hard of hearing, so I'm going to make sure. You're going to do that in your video as you introduce yourself to Barb, and we're going to do some teaching. Before we get started, I understand you sometimes have difficulty hearing. Do you have your hearing aid in? Okay, that shows very clearly in the video that you've addressed that. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Keep asking your questions on the chat box. I'll kind of hit them at the end. The next part on the written piece gets into the diagnosis and problem. This is a teaching plan. Okay, your diagnosis will be knowledge deficit. No ifs, ands, or buts. I just gave you your NANDA. It's knowledge deficit. Okay, the related to factor. Ask yourself, what is the topic content you're teaching? Don't be too broad that you're saying diabetes, but don't be too pinpointed that you're listing every single thing that you're teaching the patient. Okay, what was the topic that you guys chose? Okay, that's your related to factor. Your as evidenced by is, how do you know that Barb needs taught about this topic? Well, the biggest factor is the fact that she is a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic, okay? So you can make this client specific based on statements. You can make this client specific, based on information provided in the patient info document, okay? But basically, this is just what you did for CP2. You came up with the diagnosis, you figured out what the related to factor was, and you included the as evidenced by that led you to pick the NANDA. Again, because this is a teaching plan, your NANDA is already selected for you. It's a knowledge deficit. Okay, so writing your goal, okay? So you need to kind of think about this, because this is going to drive what you do in the video, because your goal is what you're going to have Barb do at the very end for you to be able to evaluate her. So after teaching Barb about the topic, how would you know that she understood what you taught her? Okay, if it's cognitive information, maybe she can restate key points. If it's a psychomotor skill, okay, like, you know, we teach patients at home to do their own dressing changes, or family members to do dressing changes. If it's a psychomotor thing, they can do return demonstration. But think about how you would evaluate that Barb understood your teaching and can do your teaching, okay? And then write your goal clearly, so anybody can read it and determine if she was successful in learning or if she needs additional teaching. As I mentioned before, in your video, you are going to have to evaluate Barb. So Barb's going to have to show whether she can or she can't do what you taught, okay, or understand what you've taught. So you want to make sure it's realistic. And again, if you're doing something like glucose monitoring, your Barb needs to be willing to do that. For the interventions and rationale, okay, I am not looking for a book here, okay? Remember, you're teaching your client, and they're going to learn best when your teaching is short, it's very targeted, it's to the point. They also need priority information, okay? There's needs to know, there's nice to know, and there's nuts to know. What does Barb need to know about your topic, okay? We'll talk about your video, but your video should not be longer than 8.5 minutes. So you need to be very targeted and prioritize the key information that you need to teach her, okay? So stick to your topic. Stick to your topic. You can do this in a bulleted fashion. Write the intervention points as if you were speaking directly to Barb. Okay, so, you know, if you were teaching her about, you know, metformin, okay, we're going to start her on metformin. You would bullet those points and say what you would say to her, teaching her about her metformin, okay? For the rationale, so figure for each bullet point you have under intervention, you're going to have a corresponding bullet point under rationale. Now, I don't care if you do bullet points or you do numbers. I don't care. Whatever makes it easier for you guys to follow. But basically, the content of the information that you have in the intervention needs to be supported by a faculty level rationale. You know, so for example, if you were teaching Barb about a beta blocker, I know this has nothing to do with diabetes, but, you know, let's just say she was, you know, being on metoprolol, and you wanted to teach her how to check her radial pulse and count it for a minute before she takes her pill. Your rationale would need to talk about metoprolol being a beta blocker and how it works and how that affects the heart rate. And her checking her heart rate will help keep her safe, because it won't, you know, she'll make sure she doesn't drop her heart rate too low. Okay, so for each point, for each bullet point, you need to have the rationale that supports the underlying concept, okay? And again, it needs to be faculty level rationale. I don't want rationale that's like, well, we need to teach her this so she knows how to control her diabetes, okay? That's a half-baked rationale, all right? I want faculty level rationale. Your rationale, each bullet point needs to have an in-text citation. At the end of the template, there's an area for a full reference list for what you're referencing. It needs to be there, okay? That's how APA is going to be evaluated on this. Okay, for the evaluation piece, as I mentioned during your video, you're going to need to have Barb demonstrate her knowledge or her skill so you can evaluate if she's met the goal or not. And then you're just going to write the evaluation statement based upon what she was able to demonstrate. So, you know, goal met, Barb was able to restate the key points of medication teaching related to metoprolol. Or goal not met, Barb was only able to identify one priority point, repeat the teaching session, emphasizing the key points, and reevaluate again tomorrow. Okay, so you're gonna, again, evaluate based upon what your Barb was able to do, okay? So that's the written piece. For the video piece, okay, this video component, this is going to demonstrate your ability to actually deliver the patient teaching on a very specific targeted topic. Now, you all provided discharge teaching in same day, whether it was face-to-face or those of you that just did the last rotation, you did it virtually, you did it via video, okay? This, you're focusing on a very specific topic, very targeted. Again, your teaching must be client specific. So again, you want to incorporate the information, the psychosocial factors about Barb into your interaction. You know, how did you select your materials? How did you, you know, if she has family or support persons, you know, how can they be involved in this? So again, how are you incorporating those factors? Again, I mentioned the role of Barb must be played by an individual outside of the group. It can be another student, it can be a family member, it can be a friend, okay? So for those of you working as individuals, use somebody that you live with. For those of you working in pairs or groups, I'm gonna talk a little bit about how you could do this on Zoom, or if you guys elect, you could do the written part together and each person could do their own video. I'm very flexible with this, particularly given the circumstances of COVID-19. You know, I want to be flexible to make it work, but still make sure you're getting, you know, the context of what this assignment was meant to do. Okay, so things to keep in mind. Clients have different learning styles, so you need to tailor your teaching to Barb. There's some information in the patient-specific information that will kind of help you with that. Things that she likes, things that she doesn't like, what resources does she have? You know, that you can tailor your teaching. You're going to do this as an RN, and not everybody learns the same way. So how you approach that patient, the information itself may be the same, but it's how you approach that patient and tailor it to their lifestyle, to their learning style is what's going to make a difference. So you do want to incorporate props into your teaching. You know, and I'm so disappointed because of this COVID thing. I just got to, you know, step off here for a minute. Okay. I got the nursing office to let me buy fake food for the lab that is an appropriate diabetic portion sizes that I was so excited that you guys were going to be able to use. And now we're at home. So it's going to have to wait till next semester. But obviously, you do have some things in your homes. You do have food labels. You can get pictures off the internet. You can use pictures from your textbook. Those of you that have chosen the topic of glucose monitoring, hopefully you, a family member, or a family member of one of your group members has a glucose monitor. If they don't, you may want to consider changing your topic because it's not realistic to be able to teach glucose monitoring without a glucose monitor. You know, obviously the topics originally were selected based on resources that were available at the college. So things to consider, and you need to talk, if you're working in a pair or group, you need to have this conversation today. Do you have the equipment or resources necessary to do the teaching? If you don't, and you guys want to change your topic, I'm fine with that, okay? You don't even need to change it on the Sign Up Genius. If you can, that's great, but it's fine. If you're going to use pre-printed patient handouts, like there's a lot of good resources out there on the internet. However, you need to make sure you are using reputable resources. You know, Joe's Crab Shack probably does not have good information on diabetes. So just make sure if you're using any type of pre-printed handout, a picture, a chart, or even, you know, considering like different electronic apps that are out there to help with management of glucose. There's, you know, glucose monitoring, track your blood glucose results. There's, you know, track your food intake and all that. Just make sure that whatever you're using, your source is reputable, and whatever you're using, the content is directed towards the patient. So many times, like WebMD has a provider side, they have a patient side. Mayo Clinic has a provider side and a patient side. So just make sure if you're using resources that you're giving to Barb, that you're using specifically with Barb's teaching, and she's looking at them and referring to them, they need to be patient-based, okay? They're not, this isn't meant to be teaching provider to provider. This is, you know, RN to patient, okay? All right, so again, with the video teaching component, okay, your video really shouldn't be longer than 8 minutes. I added a 30-second grace period, okay? There are minor point deductions if you go beyond that. So this is an exercise where you're not throwing the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, okay? You're very, very targeted in what you're teaching. Keep it to your topic. Do not go into other areas of diabetes. Focus on your topic, okay? If you're working in pairs or groups, your video must show evidence of all students' participation and contribution, okay? You have to show everybody's involved. So in general, for the actual logistics of it, because we work off the Play-Doh platform and I work off a PC laptop, you can record on a laptop computer, you can record on a tablet, you can record on your phone. When you go to upload the file though, it needs to be in an MP4 file format. If you have an iPad, if you have an iPhone, I believe it's a different format. It's .mov. I don't know what that means, but it's a, there are available on the internet .mov to MP4 converters. When you go to actually upload it to Play-Doh, because you're going to have a special Dropbox for this, it's the video Dropbox. So you can't go into the regular Dropbox area. You have to go into CP3. You have to look where it says video Dropbox. It's listed there. And then you're going to upload it into there. But it has to be an MP4 file or I'm not going to be able to open it and see it. So if you upload the wrong kind of file, I'm going to contact you and say, I need you to upload the right file because I can't watch it. For people working in pairs or groups, you can use the Zoom platform. You can actually do a video conference, kind of like what we do for class. And you can use that to record yourselves providing teaching to Barb. To use Zoom, you do have the ability to create, it's a free basic Zoom account, and it does allow you to record. I do believe for a basic account, it records directly to your computer. I have a premium account, so I record up to the cloud, but it's on your computer. So it may take time for your video to process. So just kind of keep that in mind. I do have I have an announcement on Play-Doh with some Zoom resource links that I'm going to be adding to that, because if you're doing this using Zoom as a pair or a group, somebody has to register and be the host, but you also have to enable a co-host and you have to share your screen and how to record. So I'm going to have some resources up there. Again, it will be totally up to the group. You know, I would definitely have that discussion today or tomorrow. Are you good with the topic that you selected, first of all? If not, look at the other options. You can select a new topic. And then the other thing too is if you're working in pairs or groups, think it through. What's the logistics of this? How are we going to do the video piece? Okay. So just kind of thinking that through. So for submission, there's actually 2 separate places you're going to be uploading. The video component has a special Dropbox. It's a video Dropbox. Okay. Again, it needs to be the MP4 file. The written component has its own Dropbox that you just upload like you normally do. That's not a big deal. Do make sure it's in Word format, just like you uploaded CP2. Both of these components are scheduled to be due Wednesday, April 22nd at 4:30. Notice the time difference. That date and time was selected when we were all back on campus. If that day comes up, and you guys are having problems, get in contact with me. Okay, I don't want you stressing over it, but I also set that date because I need time to be able to review all of the videos. So for me to accurately evaluate everything, I needed to have a time frame there. When you upload these things, in the comment box, both on the video and the written component, just make sure you note all your group member names. For the video, and really for the written component too, if you're working in a pair or group, only one of you needs to upload it, okay? But again, you need to note who is in the pair, who is in the group in the comments, so I know who is who. Okay. All right. So let me stop the share, come back here. Let me take a look at the chat box, and we'll kind of work our way through. Okay, that was at the beginning. If you have questions, keep putting them in the chat box. Do we have to use props in our video? I definitely would, just because in real life, if you were going in to teach the patient, you're going to have something that you're giving them or doing with them. Obviously, if it's a psychomotor skill, you're definitely going to want to, have props there. Is there one written component per group, or does everyone have to do one? Okay, I addressed that. Just one per group. Just make sure when it's uploaded, whoever uploads it, in the comment section, mark who the group members were, so I can make sure everybody gets appropriate credit. Yeah, our group was supposed to teach how to administer Victoza. Yeah, that's probably, your group's probably going to have to look at a topic change. I would recommend that. Okay, so would one person in our group be able to show return demonstration and the others two can teach by going on the Zoom and recording? Your patient needs to be somebody outside of your group. So the way I would envision this, like let's, for example, I'm just going to pick on Casey Rambo and Emily Sabo. We're going to say they're in a group with me, and we're teaching glucose monitoring. I have a glucose monitor here, so that's great. I'll be the one doing the hands-on teaching. So we could divide it up that I could do the actual piece where I'm showing Barb how to check her glucose, and I would be the one, here's the equipment, and Barb would re-demonstrate it. But at some point, Casey and Emily would have to chime in and be able to provide some information to Barb as she's doing it. So maybe I'm the one physically showing her how to do it, while Casey's walking her verbally through the steps, and then Emily takes over. This is where, as a group, you kind of have to work out the logistics. If your group talks about it and you said, you know what, it's going to be too difficult for us to do our videos together, but we can do the written component together and do our own videos, I'm okay with that too. I'm very flexible with this, obviously, the situation being what it is. It's certainly not turning out the way I initially planned it. With my food that the office bought for me, I'm all disappointed on that, but all right. Okay, let me see here. Pens, glucose monitors. So is this how we uploaded to SDS for teaching? Okay, so those of you that just completed your SDS rotation virtually, yes, you are going to upload it the same way you uploaded your teaching videos for SDS. Those of you that did same day before spring break, this process is a little bit different for you. But my understanding, I'd have to check with Mrs. Morrison, but my understanding is it was pretty user-friendly. But definitely, if you're having trouble, reach out to me, link up with one of your peers who was just doing same-day services here since we've been COVID-19, and they can kind of walk you through that process. And again, I'll have some resources specifically for Zoom up there that, if you want to do it that way, that might be I think that's probably, to try to do it as a group, that's going to be the way to do it to make it work. Obviously, again, this isn't, this doesn't turn out to be the way the assignment was intended, but I still want to make sure you have the opportunity to, demonstrate your ability to plan and execute that teaching and then evaluate it. So I think I've answered all the questions on the side. Any last minute questions at all? Going once? Oh, here. If we do the video separate, do we have to pick the same teaching points to select, or can we do different ones? You can do different ones. I will tell you, the way I evaluate groups and the way I evaluate videos, I look at what the topic is. And I have a list of teaching points that I'm looking for in the video. I'm not going to put those out there, mainly because part of this is you, as a nurse, ciphering down what is that need to know information for the patient. So when I'm looking at a video, I am, I have my little checklist here. If they're doing glucose monitoring, there's a list, there's like 5 points that I'm looking for in particular that they address in there. So, You can certainly include different points, but they need to be priority points, you know, for that particular topic. So, but how you deliver the teaching, if you do the video separately, how you deliver it, you know, that's the art of nursing. You know, the science of nursing is the content, what you're teaching to the patient, how you do it, how you tailor it, how you use your own personal communication skills and style to interact with that patient. That's your art of nursing. So, other questions at all? Nope. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, if not, have a great weekend. This video will be uploaded, and the PowerPoint that went along with this video is already present on the Clinical Plato site. So have a great weekend, everyone.